we wanted to know what number can we square that makes 324, the way we can answer that question is to use our square root function and take the square root of 324. Whatever we fill in the blank here, when we take the square root of 324 with our calculator, is what goes in the blank here. That number squared would give us 324. So again, take your calculator, put in 324, get your square root function, and you should find that the answer is 18. A whole number this time. 18 times 18 gives us 324. Numbers like 324 or 25 or 81 that we looked at before, 144, anytime the square root of that number is a whole number, anytime you can take a whole number, square it, and get that number, we call those numbers perfect square numbers. So 324 would be an example of a perfect square number. 49 would be, because 7 is a whole number and 7 squared makes 49. 81 would be a perfect square number, because 9 squared equals 81. 25 is a perfect square number. 5 squared gives us 25. Let's find some square roots of some other numbers that are not perfect square numbers, meaning when we take the square root, we're not going to get a whole number. For example, let's find the square root of 40. Which again, whatever that answer is, whatever the answer to the square root of 40 is, oops, don't want to square there. Whatever the answer to the square root of 40 is, that's the number that if we square it would give us 40. So let's take our calculators again, put in 40, hit the square root sign, and my display is 6.3245553. Again, a non-terminating, non-repeating decimal, it appears. So we need to, again, approximate that. If we approximated this time, let's say to the nearest tenth, that would be 6.3 rounded to the nearest tenth, wouldn't it? That tells us then, if we were to square 6.3, we would get approximately 40. It's not exactly 40, because 40 isn't one of our perfect square numbers. A perfect square number has a whole number that you can square that will make it. 40 is not one of our perfect square numbers. Let's again see how close we get. So take 6.3 times 6.3, and that gives us 39.69. Exactly 40? No. Why not? Well, because we rounded our answer. We don't have an exact answer. It has to be an approximation. Try this one. Use your calculator to find the square root of 23, and then use your calculator to find the square root of 90. So we put in 23 into the display, hit the square root symbol. And if we round our answer there to the nearest tenth, rounded to the nearest tenth, you should have gotten 4.8. Did you? Now try the square root of 90. Clear your display, put in 90, hit your square root symbol. If we round that to the nearest tenth, that would be 9.5. So again, that tells us that 23 and 90 are not examples of our perfect square numbers because their square root didn't turn out to be a whole number. There's no whole number we can square that gives 23. There's no whole number that we can square that will give 90. We just have to get decimal approximations when we need those values. Try two more as we finish out this lesson. Use your calculator to find the number that you could square that would make 380. Remember, that's what the square root is. Remember this idea? The square root of a number is the number that you can square that will make that number. When you fill in this blank by using your calculator's square root function, you're filling in this blank. You're finding the number that you can square that would make 380. So again, use your calculator to find the square root of 380. Make sure the display is cleared. Put in 380. Hit your square root symbol. And rounding to the nearest tenth, we should have 19.5. So if we square 19.5, we're going to get very close to 380. Exactly 380? No, because it's an approximation. There is no whole number that we can square that gives us 380, so we will always be getting a decimal approximation. Now, this is very significant because there are some times when we encounter an equation that says x squared equals 52. And we want to know, well, what number could we square that would give us 52? Well, the number you can square that gives you a value, you can find by taking the square root of that value. So when we need to answer a question like this, we can find out what x is by taking the square root of the value over here, taking the square root of this constant. And we're going to be using that in some problems that we will look at in the next video.